Good evening. I'm Anthony Cox, class of 2010, and on behalf of President Strong, the Board of Trustees, faculty, staff, and students, I'm honored to welcome you all to the 100th anniversary of Southwestern University's first homecoming, and especially to tonight's gala event, celebrating 40 years of African American alumni achievement. We gather this evening as alumni, students, and friends of Southwestern to acknowledge and celebrate what each of us brings to one another, this community, and the world. Celebrating with us are members of Southwestern's highest giving societies, the President's Council, 1840 Society, and the Brown Society. Would members of these societies please stand and let us thank you for your generous support of Southwestern. We'd also like to thank another group of donors, those who have given through the years to fund scholarships designated for high-achieving African American, Hispanic, and Native American students. The Houston Endowment first established the presidential scholarships for this purpose. These scholarships were later named in honor of Bishop Ernest T. Dixon. This year, Dixon Scholarship Program marks its 10th anniversary of supporting Southwestern students. During the last 10 years, Dixon scholars have maintained an average GPA of 3.42, and 87% have graduated in the 4 years, which places them above the overall student body average in both categories. We'd also like to thank the Texas Methodist Foundation for administering the Dixon Scholarship Program and all the donors who designate their gifts especially for this purpose. A reception will follow in the Jim and Pat Wazel lobby outside this theater. All are welcome to attend. Achievement. Something accomplished, especially by superior ability, special effort, or great courage. A great or heroic deed, an attainment, or an accomplishment. Achievement is breaking barriers. Achievement is facing challenges. Achievement is discovering your own power and using it for good. Achievement is seizing opportunities wherever they may lie. Achievement can be attained by one. Achievement can be attained by two or more. Achievement can spread, change entire communities, and the world. Let's start a little over 40 years ago when barriers at Southwestern University were being broken.
My first experience with Southwestern University, I was one of the students in the Negro Fine Arts program that they sponsored and was conducted at the United Methodist Church here. I was a pianist. I started from very meager, and by the time that I had finished, I suppose I surpassed the other students. So when it came time for me to go to college, she says, well, you're already with us, so you might as well go on over. And I guess she must have scared everybody to death. Because at that time, blacks and whites didn't go to the same school.
When I got here, I had already been through a lot of interesting experiences being a person who had been alone in many ways. Because in 1965, I decided to move from an all-black school to an all-white school. At the first time that it could happen, because I wanted to play baseball. And there were 4 of us that went to that school, La Vega High School in Waco. And so I went there, and I went through that experience. And so when I came here, it was not an unusual experience for me.
When I went to school at Southwestern, it was just about the time the guy got in the tower and was shooting people. Our country was in a very bad situation.
It was a tough place for people of color. Just because the critical mass wasn't here in terms of the diversity experience.
The 7 of us that were here at the time did bond and became close friends. I also began to get friends in the wider community. I shared some interest in the theater and also in political activism. And the women's issues, that was becoming on the forefront. We had just come out of a real civil rights move, and so there were students that I immediately found that had my interest, and that really helped smooth the moving into Southwestern.
Well, when you're 19, you don't think about the civil rights movement. You're thinking more of, if they hadn't put me on the news last night, I would have changed my mind and not went to the school because too many people were interested in where I was going. The reason I didn't drop out is because one day I saw myself on the television and my mother, and I said, well, a lot of people are depending on me to go to school up there. I guess I can't change my mind.
Civil rights were becoming more and more important, and that if you were a college that took civil rights seriously, you needed to be more diverse.
In high school, I was the only person of color on my basketball team and my baseball team. And what I found about people, it all comes down to the one-on-one.
The differences that we bring are as important as the similarities.
When I was growing up, you're either white or black, and if you're black, you knew everybody's name. If you were white, you didn't even notice them because their faces were not filled in. You never talked with them. And at Southwestern, the faces began to become people.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Ernest Clark, class of 1969.
There's a Negro spiritual that says, when Israel was in Egypt land, let my people go. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land. Tell Pharaoh to let my people go. I used to think that I could not go on, and life was nothing but an awful song. But now I know the meaning of true love. I'm leaning on the everlasting arm. If I can see it, then I can do it. If I just believe it, there's nothing to it. I believe I can fly. 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 I believe I can fly.
Good evening. Southwestern University, September 3rd, 1969. I am Sammy Robinson, and this is my story. When I came to Southwestern, my cohort of 5 students, Diane Wheaton, Nate Wright, Jesse Harvey, and Cheryl Hughes, joined the 5 black students then on campus: Winston Phelps and Alvin Hebert, Lydia Gardner and Gail Rivers, all of whom came in pairs from the same high school in Houston, Texas, so that they could have roommates, and Larry Haynes, a baseball player from Waco, Texas. We were something of an experiment by a new dean of women, Mary Lou Apple, who put us in integrated roommate situations in Laura Kirkendall Hall. My situation was with a former resident of the Methodist home in Waco, who later became a dentist in Eagle Lake, Texas, and the daughter of an agency for international development official of whom I've lost track, unfortunately. I remember participating in Rush, knowing the outcome, because although we like you, Sammy, our alums would just have a fit if we pledged you, darling. Edith Sarge Williams ran the Commons Dining Hall. The decade of the 60s was drawing to a close. The Vietnam War was still going on. Homecoming didn't mean so much to us because our only alum was Ernie Clark, a music teacher. But I do remember that we were so glad when he would come to campus, and we would just gleefully say, well, let's just go greet our alum. College life at Southwestern. I remember having work-study jobs in the Dean of Students' office with Dean Swift and Charlotte Taylor, and being a resident assistant in LK and Kurth Hall. Dorm life for me revolved around life in LK, Kurth, and ultimately the guest house, where I learned about candle passes and that being dropped was a good thing, the precursor to getting pinned and ultimately engaged. I remember the Kappa Alpha Old South ceremonies on the LK yard. I particularly remember one that was interrupted by a group of male students who had on war paint and Indian headdresses. I remember the Black Room in Mood Hall. That was when it was closed, and we weren't supposed to be there. But what a thrill in the search for a place to be us it was to sneak to the top floor of the Cullen Ad building before it was renovated and reopened. I remember founding Black Organization for Social Survival, our boss, At one of the meetings by the fountain, where the few students of color would go to discuss such controversial topics of the day as interracial dating. I remember basketball games and intramural sports and mask and wig. I remember religious experiences because chapel, though no longer required, was a weekly happening with contemporary services that ranged from plays to coffee house type concerts. I remember, as part of my religious experience, receiving stares in local white churches and standing ovations when worshiping in local black churches. I remember taking Baby Bible from Dr. Steelman and hearing about Martin Buber from Dr. John Score. He, along with several other memorable professors, Dr. Martha Allen, Dr. Virginia Carwell, Dr. Lois Parker, Dr. John Chapman, Dr. Leonard Giesecke, Dr. Wendell Osborne, Mr. Tex Casson, and the inimitable Mr. Bridges, who, when I finished my senior year, could tell me every problem I ever missed on every accounting exam. I graduated from Southwestern on May 27, 1973. I left with the declaration that this is all the formal education I'll ever need, only to find myself some years later at Southern Methodist in Dallas and the University of Kansas some years later. Southwestern gave me wings, and today I am Dr. Sammy Robinson, Assistant Professor of Management at Prairie View A&M.
Achievement can be attained by one. Achievement can be attained by two or more. Achievement can spread, touch entire communities, and the world. In the 1980s, there were new challenges to face.
Just pledging Pi Kappa Alpha, that one experience, and having been the first African American to pledge at Pike was an interesting deal. And again, my grandmother said it'll be a good experience for you if they extend you a bit, and it'll be a good experience for them.
Diversity, I think, is absolutely pivotal, critical to a liberal arts education. The first master plan that Southwestern did, at least the one that led up to our strong boost in the minority direction, was done in 81-82 school year. And that was a point at which the institution said that the goal was to have 12% of our students minority by 1990.
It was just an interesting time when there especially were no black faculty, no black staff outside of those who worked in the cafeterias and in the student union. They were there, and you talked to them, and some of their children were going to school here.
I arrived in the summer of '82, and in the fall of '82, we talked about that, and in fact, I raised the question that year with the planning committee, and so I was encouraging us to redefine that goal to target what were and still are unrepresented groups in the population. I used to tell prospective students many times that if you go to a school that is not diverse enough, you really aren't going to get a very good education.
Hi, everybody. It's Southwestern University, and it's August 28th, 1979. I'm barely 18 years old, and I'm actually in college. Can you believe that? And I look at Jake Strum and think about when I worked for him in the Cullen Building. I was excited, very ready to conquer the world, very ready to learn and explore. I've always been a bit of a risk taker, and so I was ready to take on all the challenges. And what a beautiful campus this place was. Everyone was warm and friendly. I remember my mother asking me, where in the world are we going? We were from Houston, and I was coming from Austin, and we didn't even know where Georgetown was. But I was accepted with open arms, and it was the very first day of school. My roommate and one other student who was from McKinney, Texas, decided that we needed some snacks in the room. And so the three of us take off and walk towards the square in Georgetown because we didn't have a car. And we go into a little store on the square. We gather all the chips and sandwich makings that you could find, take it to the counter, and the lady at the counter had a very solemn face that I had not seen before and left the counter and went and got her husband. He came to the counter and said, "We don't serve your kind." Well, being naive, I thought he meant Southwestern students. And so I said, Southwestern kids, Southwestern students? And a very solemn, straight face, "Your kind. Please leave my store immediately." One of the ladies that was with me was from a small town, and she understood exactly what he meant and said, "I think it's time for us to go, Janine." So it was a very long and hot walk back to the university with not a lot to say, but a lot of confusion, a lot of misunderstanding, and questioning whether or not I'd made the right decision. Was I in the right place, and where was I? I thought that I was being encouraged to learn and to be open. And what is this town, and what is it all about? And now I understand why my grandfather said, "You're going to where?" You're going to the place in Texas where they were the last to lynch. Please be careful. Get back to school, and I asked the RA, we all had mentors as freshmen, about the situation. And they were like, "Oh yeah, we forgot, don't go there." And I'm thinking, it's okay as long as I don't go there. Where am I? What am I doing, and have I made the right decision? The year goes on, it's pretty tough. I'm not the smartest kid in the room anymore, and I'm learning for the first time how to really study. I'm a major in pre-med, and I soon learned that B's aren't good enough to get into medical school. I then meet Dr. Douglas Hooker, who I owe so much to and has been my mentor until the time that he died. And we started talking about my dreams and aspirations and what he saw that I could do, much bigger than what I could ever see. But I'm a bit frustrated because, again, I'm the first, a little tired of being the first, and a little tired of always having to make the way. And I decide one day that I'm done. I'm going to the University of Houston, I'm putting Southwestern behind me, and I'm moving on. And I called my mom, who was a very wise woman, and I realized later that she was pulling her hair out because I'm the first kid to leave home, and I was talking about changing. And I told her how I felt. I was tired of being the first. I was tired of not seeing people that looked like me. I was tired of having to explain why I did what I did to my hair. There was no one in a leadership role that looked like me. And there was nobody even in my dorm to even clean my room up. The lady who cleaned my room up didn't speak much English, but she was very good at telling me what I needed, which was Tylenol and aspirin and a lot of water. So she took good care of me. And so after my mom listened to what I had to say, she gave me some very wise counsel. She said, "I want you to remember something. I want you to think about this as you make your decision, and it is ultimately your decision. But you have a very unique feature, and that is when you walk into that classroom and you're the only person that looks like you, you never have to explain who you are. You are who you are. You were born with that brown skin for a reason, and that's okay. But I also want you to remember, what are you really there for? And what are your real responsibilities? Who are you on the inside? What makes you tick? What are your contributions? What are your responsibilities? What are you accountable for? How can you make a difference? And who's on the inside? So that when you walk away, they know you as Janine, who did all these things and happened to be black, rather than the black girl Janine. And I thought about that, and I thought, okay, she's just trying to get me to stay. But it made sense, and it continues to make sense. Southwestern was responsible for opening a much bigger door than I could ever imagine. And between my mother and Douglas Hooker kind of quietly pushing me along the way, and me thinking that I was okay with myself, but not realizing that the door was much bigger than what I could ever imagine, I'm able to see things in a totally different light. I'm able to accept the things that people do and say, the cultures, the beliefs, the thoughts. Anything that's different is okay. It helped me to broaden my perspective. And for every student that came behind me, especially after I graduated, and that happened to look like me, I tried to encourage them to stay and gave them those same words of wisdom. I can have peace and not allow it to be disturbed by others who want me to conform because they are uncomfortable with who I am. I graduated from Southwestern University, December of 1983, and today I'm the HR Director for the Texas Lottery Commission.
Achievement can be attained by one. Achievement can be attained by two or more. Achievement can spread, touch entire communities and the world. In the 1990s, students began to discover their own power to transform.
I was the first African American at Georgetown, and I'm not sure if they've had one since, but for the little girls of color, it was really cool for them to see a princess that looked like them, and it was very encouraging for them to know that they too, if they did what they were supposed to do, could one day wear a crown. I think during my tenure here, there were probably 10 black students in total. It was a little different for me though, because 3 of those 10, or 3 of those 9, because I'd be one of the 10, were related to me. So I had 3 male cousins here at the exact same time that I was here. So it was almost like being at my aunt's house, you know, kind of, sort of. I don't know, I think there were African American students who really struggled because there were so few of us.
Having a sense of leadership and accountability and empowerment really happened to me in my first year here. On a particular day, I'm, just enjoying the wonderful weather and on my way to class, and happened to glance up in the window of one of our first-year male residence halls and saw a large Confederate flag plastered in the window. And at the moment, I thought, okay, that's interesting. And then I kept walking, and as I kept walking in class, the more I thought about it, the more it started to bother me. And so I said, I'm gonna go knock on Mike Leese's door. And he was always really accessible, so I never thought twice about just walking up to the field house at the time and knocking on his door and saying, I need to talk to you about something. And when I spoke to him about what had happened, the first thing that came out of his mouth was, I think we should sit down and talk about this with the student. I think it would be important for this young man in that case to hear how you feel. And I was like, okay. I was like, yeah, let's do that. And so he set up an opportunity for the two of us to sit down, and I was just very candid in terms of my feelings, my personal feelings about what that flag meant to me and how it made me feel as an African American student on this campus. And a lot of what I voiced was a sense of not feeling welcome at a place that I should feel at home. And the student and I dialogued back and forth, and I got a little bit of a sense of what his perspective was on what the flag meant to him. And so we left that conversation, I think maybe agreeing to disagree, but I felt like at least he heard me and I heard him. And a couple of days later, I was walking across campus in that same pathway, glanced up, and that flag was gone. And I remember thinking, wow, I had an issue, I voiced it, I was supported in that, and something was done about it. And that was the first time I really felt powerful.
From a diversity perspective, when I think about diversity, I think about more than color. You know, diversity means thought, it means the way we look, the way we sound, the way we act, what we believe. And I think diversity is so important in all areas of our life and in everything we try to do and we practice, and particularly at a place like Southwestern, because it's important to have so many voices. And you can hear all the different voices and then come up with a conclusion or decision that works for you, as opposed to just hearing one kind of monolithic and not having anything to help you grow.
Southwestern University on August 23rd, 1988. I am Angelique Campbell, and this is my story. It was divine intervention that led me to Southwestern. I had not heard of this university, much less knew there was a city named Georgetown in Texas. My path after graduating high school was headed down the other direction of I-35 to what was then called Southwest Texas State to pursue a degree in journalism. At least that's what my high school journalism teacher thought as well when she recommended her alma mater. An invitation to a prospective student weekend and Brown Symposium at SU showed up in my mail, and I could not have been more excited. The featured speaker was Alex Haley, and yes, to this day, I still treasure my picture with him taken at SU and my signed copy of the autobiography of Malcolm X. I was hooked. What a thrilling day when I received my acceptance letter to SU and a presidential scholarship. What a disappointment for my journalism teacher who congratulated me, but informed me that I'd applied to the wrong school. And yet it was the right school. SU opened a new world of experiences for me. I was given permission to explore all that SU had to offer a student, and then at times pushed the university beyond its comfort zone to offer me, as an African American, even more. This partnership defined one of the most memorable experiences I had at Southwestern, my time in the student organization, Ebony. With my friends Elizabeth and Julie, we formed a leadership team in Ebony that aimed to redefine what it meant to be a student of color on SU's campus. Oh yeah, my roommate Christy forged a similar revolution in the student group Latinos Unidos. We were on a mission to let SU know that students of color were now part of the SU fabric, and in turn invited others to join our cause. Yes, there were white students in Ebony. It was a new day. We sponsored forums and programs on African American history and issues of the day, hosted Passport to the Future, a college preparatory program for African American students from area high schools, collaborated with Student Life and its fearless director, Dorita Hatchett, class of 1988, to sponsor African American musicians and events, and took second place honors at SU's homecoming student group competition, Sing, the first in SU's history. We even took our message of empowerment to other schools in the area, Houston-Tillotson, Southwest Texas State, thanks to Earl Mosley, and even as far as Texas A&M, where some of my childhood friends from Houston started SBSLC, the Southwest Black Student Leadership Conference, an event that continues to this day. But our most memorable time together was at the African American alumni receptions during homecoming. Each year we gathered in Mood Bridwell Hall with administrators, faculty, African American alumni, and our parents to fellowship and reflect. For the 1989 homecoming reception, we honored Mr. Ernest Clark, SU's first African American graduate. And at this time, Mr. Clark, it had been some time since he had returned to SU since he graduated in 1969. We longed for a connection to the pioneer who created a path for us here. And listening to Mr. Clark recount his love of music, his journey that led to Southwestern, and his personal triumphs and struggles inspired us all. We knew that the seed we planted then at that homecoming would take root and bloom into a strong Ebony presence years later and into this celebration tonight. In preparing for these remarks, Liz Guillory Medina,
class of 1997, shared with me how significant and active Ebony was during her time at SU. And the years that have followed prove that this tie continues to unite us all. Yes, it truly is a new day. I graduated cum laude from Southwestern University on May 9th, 1992, with a joint degree in political science and communication, and was the first female and African American from SU selected as the National Truman Scholar, thanks to Dr. Tim O'Neill. I earned a joint law and public policy degree from the University of Texas, and today I am a senior policy analyst and lead analysis projects on banking regulation and consumer protection at the Federal Reserve Board in Washington, D.C.
Achievement can be attained by one. Achievement can be attained by two or more. Achievement can spread, touch entire communities, and the world. As the 21st century began, a world of opportunities opened. Diversity began to be redefined.
Having 40 years of African American alumni at Southwestern, and then, comparing that with just kind of the change that our nation has gone through in 40 years. I mean, I think that both, mirror just significant changes in and of themselves. I mean, 40 years ago, Ernest Clark, stepped foot at Southwestern, and then, several years later, I stepped foot on Southwestern's campus, and just kind of thinking about the success that students can have over the course of just a short period of time is, it's very impressive.
Everyone brings something different to the plate, and diversity doesn't necessarily mean the color of your skin, but your walk of life, where you come from. Diversity is a myriad of experiences, and each person brings something totally different to the table. 40
years ago, no one would have ever expected us to have, an African American president. I know when I stepped foot on Southwestern's campus in, 99, I think, I never expected us to have, an African American president in my lifetime. So I think it just kind of mirrors that. You start small, you start with one person, but when you actually multiply that out over the number of African American alumni that have been here through the years, and then how many people's lives that we touch, that has a great impact.
When I came to Southwestern, it was truly an eye-opening experience, especially getting to interact with individuals from different cities, different states, even from different countries. It really just opened my eyes to a world that I had never even imagined.
Good evening. Southwestern University, August 2004. My name's LaToya Alexander, and this is my story. I walked onto the breathtaking campus and saw that it was just as I had remembered it. Everything was just as green as it had been a few months before when I visited, and I wondered exactly how much time and effort was dedicated to make a community this green in Texas, in the summer. I noticed the buildings looked the same, and for the most part, the people did as well, except for one thing. I could not find one black person. I searched and searched, and my parents and I were beginning to believe that the smiling faces that we saw in the brochures might not exist. Then, as I walked into the McCombs building, admired the flags of all the different countries on the wall, I heard a boisterous sound come from the other end of the room. There, in a red blouse and black slacks, was Mary Louisa Burgess, who seemed to be smiling directly at me. I remember her coming over and greeting my parents and I with such genuine hospitality. And she informed me that while there may not be many of us on campus, the few that were there were like family. And since it was obvious that Southwestern was going to be my new home, She insisted that I meet my new family. I suppose that is how I got started with the organization Ebony. Ebony was a club designed to provide support for minorities on campus in an environment that can often be difficult for some. Despite its name, Ebony was not about being an organization for those with a particular skin tone. It was, and it is, in fact, an acronym, encouraging Blacks and others to never yield. And that is exactly what I learned to do at Southwestern. Through my 4 years at this institution, I faced many obstacles, challenges, and rewards. And whether the situation was comical, sad, or frustrating, I embedded the motto of Ebony in my actions. I learned to not yield to the racial stereotypes that can often be demonstrated through some of the students on campus, and to instead learn about where it was they came from, and attempt to understand, if not change, their perspectives. When the coach of the track team told me that there was no one who could instruct me on how to do field events of shot put and discus, I did not yield. I pushed through, and after several mishaps which could have possibly rendered some individuals incapacitated, I persevered. When during Black History Month, I decided to send daily Black history facts through campus-wide emails, I did not yield when I received negative feedback about the flooding of people's inboxes. Instead, I started a healthy school-wide debate about the importance of learning about our history, not just Black history. When the numbers of Black minority students in each incoming class seemed to be dwindling at an exponential rate, I did not yield. The members of Ebony made sure to call students. We hosted them and brought them into our homes. We gave tours for free, and we made sure to strategically place individuals around the campus so that the true diversity of Southwestern could be seen in but a mere glimpse. My senior year in college, when Mrs. Swain introduced the Lesotho Project, I once again was adamant about refusing to yield. Through the efforts of many of the Ebony members and the entire school community, we raised over $1,000 in 1 year to go towards an AIDS clinic in Lesotho, Africa. I graduated from Southwestern University on May 17, 2008, having achieved a number of accomplishments. More importantly, I had learned to redefine myself. I started here searching for an idea of a diversity that was reflected in skin color only. I left having diversified my abilities and myself, and by the end of those 4 years, I had been president in 2 organizations, a lettered varsity track sports member, a King Creativity Scholar, a member of Engaged Diversity, and co-founder in the Time to Heal Lesotho AIDS Project. Today, I am part of the movement known as Teach for America in Memphis, Tennessee. I teach ESL Social Studies and Language Arts to students who do not speak English. I learned at Southwestern to never yield, and with every day, I take that to heart and strive to teach my students to do the same.
Achievement can spread, touch entire communities like Southwestern and the world.
When I was at Southwestern, I had a friend. He was a resident assistant, and he was asked to room with the first 2 African-American men who lived on campus. And he readily agreed, absolutely no problem. But anyway, first week he calls home and he's talking to his dad on the telephone, and his dad said, well, who are you rooming with? He said, well, I don't have roommates, I have suite mates. Well, tell me about them. So he starts telling his dad about his suite mates, and his dad said, are they, and he used a very derogatory word to describe their race. And Ed said, well, they're African American. And he said, well, I want you to move out. And Ed said, well, why do you want me to move out? He said, I don't want you to room with them, I want you to move out. Well, he said, well, Dad, I'm not planning to move out. He said, well, if you don't move out, I'm going to disown you. And he said, well, Dad, what does that mean, you're going to disown me? He said, "You're on your own. I'm not paying for any more of your college. I'm not ever speaking to you again. As far as I'm concerned, you're dead if you stay in that room." Well, he said, "Well, Dad, I'm staying." He said, "You need to think about that." No, Dad, I've made up my mind. I'm staying." So my dad co-signed my friend's loans for the rest of his time at Southwestern. The first week I was back at Southwestern, he called me. And I said, "Ed, whatever happened to your dad?" And he said, "Well, Jake," he said, "my dad called me about 20 years ago, one night. And he said, 'Ed,' this is your dad. He said, 'I made a horrible mistake.'" And Ed said, "Well, why are you calling me now?" He said, "Well, I've been watching this television show, Roots. And he said, it's had a huge impact on me. And I realized I made a horrible mistake and I wish you'd forgive me." And Ed said, "I forgive you, Dad." And they made up, and his dad died not long after that. But I will never forget that story about Ed Lucas giving up his family to do what he knew was right. When Southwestern made the decision, and it's been now maybe 30 years ago, to become an institution that Roy Schilling, the president at that time, called an institution of national maturity. What he meant was an institution that competed with the very best institutions of our type in the United States. And when that happens, you have to be an institution that understands the major issues that the world's facing. And one of those is, how do we exist in a global community that is very diverse in every way, and help our students understand how important it is for them to not only accept but to embrace that diversity, and how that will help them become a larger and more inviting person to be around.
Ladies and gentlemen, Southwestern University President Jake B. Schrum, class of 1968.
Thank you all for being here tonight. You know, achievement can indeed be attained by one. Tonight, on behalf of Southwestern University and all the Southwestern students, past and present, who have walked across campus, lived in the residence halls, sat in classrooms, played on our athletic fields, dined together in the commons, and have been enriched through their interactions with members of this community, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the one with whom 40 years of African American achievement started. Ernie, would you come up to the stage? Now I'd like for everyone who has been directly or indirectly affected by Ernest Clark to stand.
Ernest Clark, for being the one whose achievements paved the way for achievements of others, such as myself, Southwestern would like to express its love, admiration, and gratitude.
Ernie, for your courage in a turbulent time, for facing what no others had faced, for putting together Southwestern on a transformative path. The Board of Trustees of Southwestern University voted last week to present you with the board's highest service award, the Southwestern University Medal, and it is my pleasure to give it to you tonight.
Achievement can be attained by one. Achievement can be attained by two or more. Achievement can spread, touch entire communities and the world. Mr. Clark, would you honor us by leading us in Southwestern's alma mater? As we join together as a community to sing, I would like to take a moment to encourage you all to to all who are present, to help Southwestern by referring high school students who may be the next Larry Haynes, Angelique Campbell, Ben Woods, or Latoya Alexander. Let's do this for all alma mater.